Games. Board games, video games, card games. People have always played games. Games based on fighting, based on trade, and just about everything else humans do. But what if they're not just games to be played, but places that we can explore complicated, contentious things in a fun and friendly way? Game Changing, a research project by Swansea University, is working with people of all ages in urban and rural environments to investigate how games can be used to boost our move to a sustainable, carbon-neutral world.
Net zero is a really complex thing, and games do deal with complexity. So that is a way of making quite a dry, complex and quite scary problem a lot more engaging and, potentially compelling.
One part of the Game Changing project works with rural communities on the front line of the effects of climate change and directly affected by the changes to the way we use the land.
There is a lot of polarisation in rural areas at the moment. That sense of camps taking sides of, are you a rewilder or are you a farmer? In reality, there's a lot of overlap. And so the way that this project is designed to work is to allow people to come together who might not ordinarily talk to each other about these topics and talk about complicated things, but in a less personal ways.
This strand of the project brought together people from rural Pembrokeshire communities that included traditional farmers and environmentalists and asked them to collaborate to design a game based on a future Pembrokeshire farm, where they would have to manage the land to balance ecological and economic outcomes.
What is the aim of you as the game maker? What do you want people to learn from this game?
I don't want to put loads of houses on a farm.
It's about how you work in a sustainable way, so there's always something to be made, something to be grown.
So mae sgyrsiau diddorol wedi bod yn digwydd dyn ni ar y ford yma ynglyn â pam ni'n dewis eisiau rhoi felly rhyw tir drosto ar gyfer egni, neu bwyd, neu natur.
It's absolutely fascinating. It's really a lively way to do it. I think I've never done something like this before with this kind of subject. If we could do more of this, I would be so happy.
I mean, one of the big surprises that came out of the whole project for me is the way in which thinking about games and what it is to win a game and what the objective of a game is. We're just having these amazing conversations about what it is we actually value. The only way we're going to navigate our way out of this situation, I think, is through consensus. And consensus is going to require people from, at times, quite extreme points of view to come together and to find some level of agreement. Game design and thinking about what that game looks like is one way of bringing people to the table so that we can all get a sense of what people's different values are and arrive at some kind of consensus so that we can move forward.
In many ways, the co-creation of games is uniquely placed to explore the choices, trade-offs, and benefits that will define the move towards net zero.
Games are just about designing choices for players. Really, a successful game will develop a series of interesting choices that the player can make within that game space. Any choice within a game will have consequences, and so therefore games allow, if you like, decision-making trees to develop. Now, in the context of a net zero game, really what you're asking people to do when they're in a co-design process is think about these are the choices that people can make, but also these are the consequences of those choices. Then you are developing a web of complexity, and that starts to model and mirror the everyday when it comes to something like net zero.
As well as using the co-creation of games to help people shape the future of their own communities, Game Changing also worked with young people to help them understand the history of their area by taking control of the historic Swansea Copperworks and reenacting the Industrial Revolution.
So the game is kind of like a factory game, like Theme Park or SimCity. And so what you do is you build the factory, the smelters that made the copper. And what's kind of interesting about it is that these children are actually playing in the landscape near their actual school. So they're building the houses and the factories that led to their school being built in the first place. And then, as they go on, they'll start to notice their workers start dying, and that's because of the pollution and the damage that what they're doing is creating to the environment. And so then they have to think about, well, let's make some trees, let's try and fix this somehow. Have anyone died in your factory?
Yeah,
Six people. Have you made money? How much did it cost you when a worker died? 500. Does that seem fair?
It is a pretty interesting feature.
The thing about games is that it requires the students to make decisions, and they become actors, they become agents of change. And we want to invite that kind of active response to what's going on in the environment. They weren't passive. It was up to them to grow their copperworks and then try to clean up the environmental mess they made. The magical moment for me was when one student had built this fantastic copperworks. They're making lots of money, they're making lots of copper, but the pollution levels were going up to the extent that their workers were dying, and they all of a sudden cried out, "All my workers are dying, I need to plant more trees." And I thought, well, that's the moment in some ways that I was looking for.
Game design is a great educational tool for the curriculum for Wales, as it combines the creative arts, humanities, and STEM subjects.
This is the amount of greenhouse gas emissions per type of food, and we're matching that up. So we're thinking the meat's going to have way more because the animals are going to produce a lot of greenhouse gases.
Through the project, children at primary schools across the Swansea area co-designed their own game that looked at the environmental impact of fast fashion and recycling.
Obviously, the new curriculum is all about them becoming ambitious, capable learners. It's all about them being ethical citizens as well. So today they had to design a game. They had to really think creatively and outside the box to really think about how they could make their game the best, basically.
Roedd y lunio gemau yn ddill hynod gynhwysol ac roedd yr athrawon yn gwerthfawrogi hynny achos roedden nhw'n gweld bod y disgyblion sydd fel arfer ddim yn talu cymaint o sylw i'r gwersi traddodiadol yn cymryd rhan yn hawdd. Felly oedd y dylunio gyma fel gweithgaredd yn gynhwysol. Roedd ein gweithdi ni wedi seilio ar ffasiwn cyflym ac felly roedd amcan y gêm, rhan gyntaf o'r gêm yn ymwneud â bod yn ffasiynol, ond trwy'r gêm roedd y disgyblion yn sylweddoli bod ffasiwn yn creu llawer o lygredd, felly roedd hynny'n yn ffordd da o godi ymwybyddiaeth o'r ffeithiau, ond hefyd yn ysgogi gweithred mwyn datrys y broblem.
It's a very tricky topic, isn't it, the impact of the environment, and it's something that they can't get their heads around, so maybe using games is a good way to hook them in, because they will remember the facts and they'll remember the fact that they were swapping out the cards to kind of dump the clothes, and it made them really think about the fact that, oh yes, I do dump my clothes.
Game Changing has demonstrated the important role that the arts and humanities have to play in navigating the social challenges the transition to net zero faces.
I'm incredibly excited about what's come out of this project, and I really do see a genuine role for games in helping us to think through where we are now and where we need to get to. And it's about people understanding what values we have and what values we need. We can only really implement the right technologies if we do so within the right context. And that context has to come from values from local communities, values from government, values from the wider world. So we need to have a discussion about what it is we value before we can start to think about what techniques we use to get ourselves out of this situation.
That's where the arts and humanities really matter, because methodologies like co-design enable people to work through difficult questions. This is a human problem, so it is about finding human solutions. It's about being able to imagine different futures, to understand the magnitude of the challenge that is here now, but then to find those both small and large solutions, which, because games are about problem solving, they can be part of that process of identifying and thinking through the problems. So we have got the technology, we've got the science that we know, but we need to make these human scale problems, and games can do that in quite a fun and engaging way.